All right, everybody, and we are back. Today, wrapping up the AFC East with none other than the Jets. Now, the Jets are a team that really hasn't had much postseason experience at all recently. In fact, they have the longest postseason drought currently in the National Football League, with their last appearance being back in 2010 when they went on that incredible run to the AFC Championship game, coming up short against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But looking beyond that, the Jets have actually only made the Super Bowl just once in their history, and that was all the way back 55 years ago in the 1968 season, that famous Super Bowl III victory, where Joe Namath guaranteed victory over the heavily favored Baltimore Colts of the National Football League. Then this was before the merger. The first four Super Bowls were, so the Jets were still technically part of the American Football League and won the Lombardi Trophy. But moving along now to the 2022 Jets to really see what this 7-10 record was all about. So looking at the 2022 Jets, this really was an up and down season for the New York Jets, and this was head coach Robert Saleh's second season on the sidelines, and he was more of a defensive mind, and that's certainly reflected in the team's performance last season. They have a top 5 defense through and through. They were 4th in terms of points allowed and 4th in terms of yards allowed, 3rd in terms of first downs allowed, and then you look at the passing stats in terms of what the Jets are allowing their opposition to pass for. They allowed the 3rd fewest passing yards in the National Football League, the fewest passing touchdowns, and the 2nd fewest yards per passing attempt. So definitely an elite unit against the pass, and I think that will only continue as we go forward to 2023. But looking at their offense, the Jets' offense was absolutely a bottom 5 unit in the National Football League last year. And this was a team that struggled to both run and throw the football. Although they did throw the football a lot more times than they ran it, this was still a team that ranked second to last in passing touchdowns last season, while they were only 21st in rushing touchdowns, so definitely struggled to put points on the board, and that is never a recipe for success in the National Football League. You need to score points to win games. So let's look down at this 2022 schedule now, and definitely a lot to unpack here. So first, I guess I'll note that the Jets start off this season actually in pretty good shape. They start off 7-4 as we flip the calendar to December, so they were very much in the thick of the AFC playoff race, or at least very much so in the playoff picture as we flip the calendar to December, which is a good place to be. You're coming up on the end of the season at that point. 7-4 record, firmly established as a winning team, but the unfortunate part is they end up losing their final 6 games of the season to finish with a 7-10 record. And a big part of that 7-10 record was they finished with a 2-4 record in the AFC East, which is never a recipe for success either. If you want to make the playoffs in the National Football League, every team plays 6 divisional matchups. We know this. Three games at home against each team in your division, and then 3 games on the road against each team in your division. Well, I suppose one matchup at home against each team. You know what I mean. 3 matchups total at home, 3 matchups on the road. And for the New York Jets, they ended up with a 2-4 record. If you want to make the playoffs, you probably want that number to be at least a 3-3 record, ideally 4-2 or better. But it's funny because they do end up defeating. They split their matchups with the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins, but end up getting swept by the New England Patriots, who were probably the weakest team in this division last season. And both of these matchups against the Patriots, I think, were really what did them in here. This um, Week 11 matchup on Sunday, November 20th in particular, I remember this game very well. This was a 3-3 game going right up to the final minute of regulation, and the Patriots returned a kick for a touchdown, which, wow, that really speaks to how poor the New York Jets offense was last season, where really all you needed to do was just string together a few field goals and you could have won this game, and they couldn't even reach that threshold. But as we'll see when we look to the 2023 offseason, that is certainly bound to change. So looking further down here at the individual statistics, and you can really start to see where things went awry for this New York Jets team last season at the quarterback position. This was a QB carousel through and through, just an absolute revolving door at the quarterback position, and none of these players were particularly impressive. In fact, most of these players were quite poor in their performances when they were on the field. So we have Zach Wilson, the second-year man, second overall pick in 2021 after Trevor Lawrence, and this was supposed to be a year where he took a step forward, and he really just did anything but. He starts 9 games for the Jets, does have a 5-4 record as a starter, but 1,688 passing yards to 6 passing touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Really pedestrian numbers there. That is not the stat line you would like to see from a second overall pick in his second season. Granted, he doesn't need to take a massive leap forward like Trevor Lawrence did in year 2, or even one like Justin Fields did in year 2, but it seemed that Zach Wilson kind of just stayed in neutral and maybe even got a little bit worse from his rookie season. But we look at some of these other quarterbacks here. Joe Flacco, and what looks like at this point was his final season last year. He ends up starting 4 games for the Jets with 1,000 passing yards, 5 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Funny enough, Joe Flacco might have been the best quarterback on this Jets roster last year at age 37, but that's not really a good sign when that's the results you're getting. Then finally have to mention the hero himself, Mike White, starts 4 games for the Jets, 1-3 record, much like Flacco. Actually pretty similar numbers to Flacco all around. Just shy of 1,200 passing yards, only 3 touchdowns with 4 interceptions, so even the much beloved Mike White not really doing the Jets many favors last season. So they absolutely need an answer at the quarterback position here, and I'm sure many people already know what their answer is at the quarterback position, but we will get there when we get to the offseason. Looking at the rushing and receiving stats now, so while the Jets did end up having a pretty poor showing on the ground last season, it didn't start out that way. When Breece Hall was in the lineup for them the first 7 weeks of the season, he was quite a dominant force for them. 463 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, and he gives you another 19 receptions for 218 receiving yards and another receiving touchdown. And I think it is important to note too that on the ground, he was averaging 5.8 yards per attempt, which is just staggering. And really, when you consider looking at the guys who came in after him here, Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight, they each average 3.5 yards per carry, so more than 2 yards less or 2 yards fewer per rushing attempt for those two gentlemen compared to Breece Hall. Behind the same offensive line and the same offensive scheme, yes, different quarterbacks coming in and out, but really just shows how effective Breece Hall was for them last season. And then we can look at the receiving stats here. Another rookie for the New York Jets last year, Garrett Wilson, he comes in and quickly establishes himself as the #1 receiver on this unit and really one of the better up-and-coming receivers in the National Football League with 83 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 4 touchdowns as a rookie, playing in all 17 games. Love to see that. And I will say, this Jets 2022 draft class was really something special. And look down here at the defense now with Sauce Gardner, really the third head of that 3-headed monster they took in the first round last year. So in the 2022 first round of the actual NFL draft, the New York Jets select Sauce Gardner, followed by Garrett Wilson, and then round things out by selecting Breece Hall. So they get a #1 shutdown corner here in Sauce Gardner, starts all 17 games, has 2 interceptions, 20 pass deflections, and even 3 tackles for a loss along with a quarterback hit in his rookie season. And you pair that with a #1 receiver in Garrett Wilson and what looks like a franchise running back in Breece Hall. The New York Jets really made out well in that 2022 draft and really looking up for the Jets going forward, and that's definitely why maybe a veteran quarterback who's looking at this roster might be a little enticed to want to join this unit to really see how far they can go here. But we'll also mention Quinnen Williams, of course, absolutely dominant last season, 12 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 4 pass deflections, 1 fumble recovery, 12 tackles for a loss, and 28 quarterback hits. Just an absolute beast. And before we wrap up here with the 2022 Jets, we'll give a shout out to, of course, Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner, CJ Mosley, and special teams man Justin Hardy for all receiving Pro Bowl honors. So congratulations to those men, well deserved. Now looking at the 2023 Jets off season, and there's definitely a lot going on here. We'll start with the departures because they really are outnumbered by the acquisitions. So we'll start off at the wide receiver position with Elijah Moore, who gets traded to the Cleveland Browns, like we mentioned in that video. Also, we'll mention offensive guard Nate Herbig signs with the Pittsburgh Steelers, along with linebacker Kwan Alexander joining him with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then we have another pair of players, this time departing to Houston, defensive lineman Sheldon Rankins, along with offensive tackle George Fant. And technically not listed on this chart, I believe, but we'll mention as well Corey Davis actually just retired as of within the last week, and quite a surprising move. Be interested to see if they cover that at all on Hard Knocks, which is the basically kind of like reality TV program HBO's running right now to cover the New York Jets training camp. They do it every season for a different NFL team, but the Jets are in the spotlight this year. But they lose Corey Davis as well to retirement, who is a solid receiver for them. But looking now at the acquisitions, the Jets really don't have too many holes to fill here, and they certainly get busy quick. Obviously, haven't mentioned him so far, but by far the biggest acquisition for the New York Jets, and perhaps maybe even the biggest acquisition out of any team in the National Football League this offseason. The New York Jets acquire quarterback Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers, and wouldn't really say a surprising move because Rodgers has definitely started to make it known over the last couple of years that he wasn't content in Green Bay, but definitely surprising that he was in Green Bay for his entire career for nearly the last 2 decades, and now at age 40 he's finally deciding to change things up. But look forward to seeing Rodgers with Green Bay. It will definitely provide some much needed stability for them at the quarterback position. And looking at how their defense was last season, if that defense can play like it did in 2022, this upcoming season, and they could get a healthy Breece Hall back with Aaron Rodgers, wow, the sky could be the limit for this New York Jets team. And we haven't even looked at the rest of their additions. So they also bring in 2 wide receivers from Green Bay alongside Aaron Rodgers, veterans Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb. So definitely will give Aaron Rodgers some familiar faces, help him get acquainted relatively quickly to the new culture, and will help the other players on that Jets offense really understand what Aaron Rodgers is about. And then on the defensive side of the ball, coming over from Green Bay as well, we have safety Adrian Amos. So definitely when people refer to the Jets this year as Green Bay East, they're not entirely wrong. They do have 4 pretty notable players joining this Jets squad from the Green Bay Packers. Then staying at the safety position, I'll also mention safety Chuck Clark coming over from the Baltimore Ravens in a trade. And then we also have a pair of players coming from the Seattle Seahawks, Quentin Jefferson, defensive lineman, and Al Woods also on the defensive line. So that'll definitely help the Jets stabilize what they have going on the defensive line there. And then we also have to mention the speedster Mecole Hardman from the Kansas City Chiefs coming over. And definitely going to be perhaps in a more prominent role than he may have initially expected now that Corey Davis is no longer in the fold. And then finally, just within the last couple weeks, probably their next biggest addition besides Aaron Rodgers, running back Dalvin Cook. So this is a massive move as well. Obviously, Dalvin Cook had a very decorated career with the Minnesota Vikings, and he's still not even that not even that old at age 28. He'll definitely be somebody who can provide stability in the backfield for if you would think they beat Green Bay with all the Packers they have on their roster. But for the New York Jets, while they're waiting on Breece Hall's recovery, and then even once Breece Hall does return, this will ensure that they still have a lethal running game with a potent 1-2 punch of Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook, paired with the much improved passing game with Aaron Rodgers under center. So definitely exciting stuff going on with this Jets team, and very understandable why HBO would select them to be the subject of Hard Knocks this year. Their offense looks to be much improved, and their defense really just needs to do what they did last season. But we haven't even talked about their draft yet either. So now looking at the 2023 New York Jets draft, and they do end up with 7 picks when all's said and done. No third round selection, but they do have 2 sixth round picks. And they were initially projected to be the 13th overall selection, though they end up with the 15th pick due to the Aaron Rodgers trade. Part of that trade with the Packers was, so originally the Packers were 15 and the Jets were 13, and along with additional draft picks the Jets will give them in 2024, they swapped their first round picks in 2023. So the Packers moved up 2 spaces and the Jets moved back 2 slots to the 15th overall selection. And with that pick, they select defensive edge from Iowa State, Will McDonald, who definitely will be an impact player for them year one. I feel pretty confident in saying that. This was a deep edge rushing class, and I remember when the draft happened, I did think Will McDonald went probably earlier than anticipated. He was somebody who was projected in many mock drafts leading up to the draft to go late first round, probably in the 20s, maybe even in the 30s. Potentially even creeping into that second round, but the Jets must have really saw something they liked with Will McDonald, so can't fault that against them, and who knows, if they tried to move back, maybe another team would have taken him, so they bring Will McDonald into the fold, and he'll definitely be an impact player for them. They also select center Joe Tippmann in the second round, who probably won't start this year, but definitely has a bright future ahead with the New York Jets. Then the rest of these selections are all day 3 picks. They get more offensive line depth with Carter Warren. Then they take some flyers in the late rounds here on a running back, another linebacker in Zaire Barnes. Could play a contributing role this season before taking another defensive back and a tight end to round things out. So solid draft for the Jets. Won't say it's as good as their 2022 draft, but when the bar is set that high, there's really nowhere to go but down, right? So let's look ahead to how the Jets are going to put this all together in 2023. And then we won't really waste too much time with position battles because the 53-man roster is already set. We kind of know what the Jets are thinking now in terms of who they value, who they don't, who's going to be the starters. This is probably as close to an official depth chart as we will see prior to actually seeing it on the field week 1. So we'll start off with the quarterback position, and definitely a lot of turnover here. Obviously, this is Aaron Rodgers' job through and through, but gone are Mike White and Joe Flacco. Zach Wilson does remain as the backup, and definitely an interesting dynamic here because Zach Wilson's now kind of taking the approach of basically what Aaron Rodgers had to do his first few seasons in Green Bay and what Jordan Love had to endure his first few seasons in Green Bay, sitting behind a veteran quarterback while waiting for him to ultimately be handed the keys. But the key difference here is Zach Wilson was the man for the last 2 seasons, so he was their starter, second overall pick, supposed to be the face of the franchise, but now he will be on the sidelines this year watching Aaron Rodgers do the job that he was supposed to do, and seems like Zach Wilson's taken it like a champ so far. Seems like he's been very mature about this whole situation, and who knows, maybe on the other end of this, when Aaron Rodgers does retire in a year or two, Zach Wilson could end up being the face of the New York Jets franchise. We really don't know, so definitely interested to see how that ends up shaking out. But then looking at the running back position, we have a pretty strong backfield here compared to last season. Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook being that 1-2 punch, as I mentioned, with Michael Carter now the third stringer, and the rookie Israel Abani. Hold on, I can do this. Abani Kanda, there we go. Israel Banikonda in the 5th round as the 4th player on the depth chart. Um, so, like the depth they have there, seems like they're pretty confident in all 4 of those players. 3 of them still very, very young. Michael Carter in his 3rd season, Brees Hall in his 2nd, and then Israel as a rookie. And Dalvin Cook is the veteran in the room, but like we mentioned, he's still south of 30, so definitely like what they have in the backfield. Guess we could go to wide receiver next, and definitely like this group as well. Would like it a little bit more if Corey Davis stuck around, but hey, it's his life. He can do what he wants, right? So the number 1 receiver is Garrett Wilson, of course, with Alan Lazard maintaining that rapport with Aaron Rodgers as the number 2. Mecole Hardman as more of a speed option in the slot. Then they do also have Randall Cobb as the number 4 here with a few undrafted players rounding things out, but like what they have at receiver as well, 2 guys who have strong chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, 1 guy who's an emerging superstar in the National Football League, and another player who just won the Super Bowl last season and actually has 2 Super Bowl rings to his name now in Mecole Hardman and does provide game-breaking, game-changing speed. Definitely pairs well with Aaron Rodgers' arm talent. So, like what they have in the receiver room. And moving on, we can probably look at the offensive line next because this is definitely the part of this roster where I have the most concern. And looking at this offensive line, they have Dwayne Brown at left tackle, who has always been solid with the Houston Texans and more recently the Seattle Seahawks, but Dwayne Brown is getting up there in age now and definitely have concerns that he'll be able to stay healthy and stay productive at his advanced age. I believe he is in his late 30s now. I could double check that in a second though for you guys, but at the left guard position we do have Laken Tomlinson, formerly of the San Francisco 49ers. Okay, so Dwayne Brown is age 38, so I know Aaron Rodgers is 40, but it's different playing left tackle versus quarterback, and Dwayne Brown isn't the Aaron Rodgers of left tackles. He's a fine player, but he's not a Hall of Fame level of player. But Laken Tomlinson at left guard, he's somebody who was a relatively high draft pick. Doesn't even feel like that long ago. This was actually in 2015 now, but he was a first round pick back in 2015 to the Detroit Lions, but he played for Detroit, more recently the San Francisco 49ers, and just last season with the New York Jets. He's a fine player again, but not really knocking my socks off here. At center, they have Connor McGovern from the Denver Broncos with the rookie Joe Tippmann backing him up. Right guard, first round pick from 2021, Elijah Vera Tucker. And then at right tackle, 2020 first round pick, the physical specimen himself, Mekhi Becton. So as a whole, I don't hate this starting 5. Doesn't really seem like there's a weak unit here per se, or a weak link, I suppose I should say, but definitely not impressed overall. And for Aaron Rodgers, this is absolutely a step back coming from the Green Bay Packers. If I had to compare this unit to ones we've discussed so far, honestly, if we're looking at one we discussed recently, probably the New Orleans Saints would be a very comparable unit to this one. They have a capable starting 5, but really not too much behind them. If an injury or 2 were to happen on this offensive line, things could get very ugly very quickly. So finally on this offense, we'll look at the tight end position where they have Tyler Conklin and CJ Uzomah from the Cincinnati Bengals, along with 3rd round pick from last season, Jeremy Ruckert. Don't hate this group. Aaron Rodgers is definitely going to maximize the talent here, but not really a standout either. They don't really need one though. So now looking at this New York Jets defense, and this is a team that runs a 4-3, excuse me. And looking at these 4 down linemen, for a team that runs a 4-3, I wouldn't say it's one of the more overly impressive units in the National Football League, though I would say it's an above average one. Maybe not quite top 10, but definitely above average. They have, of course, Quinnen Williams as the standout on this defensive line, along with the veteran additions coming in here, Al Woods and Quentin Jefferson from the Seattle Seahawks. They have Carl Lawson and John Franklin Myers on the outside, and they even have Will McDonald, who could potentially fill in, along with Jermaine Johnson, first round selection from last year. So excuse me, I misspoke. Brees Hall was actually a second round pick last season. I know I mentioned he was a first round pick earlier. Jermaine Jefferson was their final first round pick, though Brees Hall was a very early second round selection. But overall, like this defensive line, any defensive line with Quinnen Williams isn't going to be a bad unit by any means. And they do have good mix of young talent and veteran acquisitions here to really help support him. So don't think this defensive line got worse by any means. If anything, it only got better. So that's definitely encouraging. Looking now at the linebacker position, we have CJ Mosley at the Mike position with Jamian Sherwood and Quincy Williams projected to start alongside him, and even the rookie Zaire Barnes potentially filling in as a reserve, but not really too much doing there. CJ Mosley, we know, absolute standout player, so they should be fine here as well. Then finally looking at this secondary, and this secondary just might be the best one in the National Football League right now, and you can largely thank Sauce Gardner for that. He really has emerged as a star number one corner in the National Football League just as a rookie. Really quite incredible that in the same year where the Jets saw Darrelle Revis go to the Hall of Fame, they might have another guy like that on their hands here in Sauce Gardner. I know he played one season, very soon to anoint him as a player on the level of Darrelle Revis, but if the New York Jets end up winning a Super Bowl with Sauce Gardner on the roster this year, that's going to make things a lot easier for his eventual Hall of Fame case down the line, assuming he stays healthy and productive, of course. But looking at the rest of the secondary, they have Jordan Whitehead and Tony Adams at safety, and DJ Reed starting opposite of Sauce Gardner with Michael Carter. No, not that Michael Carter, as their nickel cornerback. Michael Carter II as their nickel cornerback. And then they do have a couple reserves here that are still relatively young. Bryce Hall and Ashton Davis on their fourth year of their rookie deals, and then the veteran Adrian Amos coming over from the Green Bay Packers, of course. So pretty thin unit here, honestly. Only 9 players in the secondary as a whole, but definitely a very productive unit in that. So looking now at this team as a whole, my impressions after looking through the roster position by position, I am pretty impressed. I do think that this is a very well-rounded unit. I don't think there's really too much to be overly concerned with. The defense seems to have stability because they have a star on the defensive line in Quinnen Williams, a star at the linebacker position in CJ Mosley, and then a star at the secondary with Sauce Gardner. And then at that point, all you really have to do is just put good supporting pieces around those players, which it seems like the front office of the New York Jets has done very well. Credit to Joe Douglas on that. But looking at the offense too, gotta love Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Love what they've done in the backfield. Love their receiving room right now. The offensive line does give me a little bit of fear. This is probably the unit that they could use the most potential opportunity to improve, I would say, on the team. But I'm not overly concerned about it either. I think Aaron Rodgers and company will be able to manage what they have here and make the most of it. But do be warned, if an injury or two were to occur on this offensive line, if, say, Mekhi Becton goes down to injury, or Dwayne Brown or Lakin, whoever, really any of these starters, they really don't have much behind them, and things could get very ugly very quickly. So, that being said, how do the Jets put all of this together for 2023? And they start off on Monday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills, which will definitely be a highly anticipated matchup. I know I'm certainly looking forward to this one, week 1. And honestly, I think the Jets are they really seem like they have a ton of mojo in their locker room right now. Just from watching Hard Knocks, that's the impression I get. And I think they're going to come out and win week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. I really do. I think they're coming out with a purpose, and this is going to be a really good game. But I think the Jets can come out on top in this one. Then looking at week 2 against Dallas, I did give Dallas the edge here, but honestly, would not be surprised at all if the Jets are able to win this game. Then week 3, they should be able to take care of the New England Patriots. Week 4, this is a Sunday night game. This should be a really good one. Patrick Mahomes versus Aaron Rodgers, of course. And I gave this one to the Chiefs, but honestly, if Chris Jones isn't in the lineup for the Kansas City Chiefs, this is absolutely a winnable game for the New York Jets as well. Then in week 5, this is the Nathaniel Hackett revenge game. The Jets are going to really be amped up for this one. I think they take this one. Week 6 against the Philadelphia Eagles at home. Do give the edge to the Eagles there, although that'll be another very good game. Week 7, they're on bye. Coming out of that, they're technically on the road against the New York Giants, but it is the same stadium for both teams, so they'll just be in the other locker room. I think the Jets take this one pretty easily, especially with 2 weeks of prep. Week 9, though, they do get an extra day of rest to play the Los Angeles Chargers at home. This should be another really good game, but do give Los Angeles the edge here, just ever so slightly. But week 10, they take care of the Raiders. Week 11 against the Bills, I think the Bills will end up splitting with the Jets, so I give the Bills this one. Black Friday against the Miami Dolphins, I do think the Jets get the better of the Dolphins. Week 13 and 14 against the Falcons and Texans at home, these should be winnable games. Week 15 against the Miami Dolphins again. I think the Jets can sweep the Dolphins this year. I know I talked about in the Dolphins video how the Dolphins could potentially split with the Jets, and they might even need to split to be able to make the postseason, but I think the Jets either sweep the Dolphins or they split. I don't see a scenario where the Jets lose both games to the Dolphins. But then rounding out the season against the Commanders, Browns, and Patriots, I believe those should be 3 wins as well. So this schedule really, it does have some tough games here for sure. Playing in the AFC East, that's certainly going to be the case, but a lot of just gimmies here in the middle of the schedule, it seems like. Games like the Falcons, the Texans, the Commanders, even playing the Patriots twice. I know it's never easy to go play Bill Belichick in that squad, but I think the Jets are the better team than them at this point in time. And like the Raiders, the Giants, like these should be games that the New York Jets win. And when all's said and done, I have them with a 12-5 record, and you can absolutely tinker around with some of these. Maybe they lose to maybe they defeat the Cowboys and the Chiefs, for instance, but then maybe they turn around and lose one of these games to Miami, or maybe they lose to the Browns, right? But I think 12-5 is a pretty reasonable projection for the New York Jets. I don't really see them wavering from that too much. If anything, it might only get better from that, which could certainly be interesting because they could definitely push for this AFC East crown, and that's really going to be kind of on the line right away in week 1. I think these are the 2 teams that are going to be in the driver's seat for the AFC East this season, and whoever wins this matchup is going to have that tiebreaker over the other team all the way until week 11. And by that point in the season, who knows how the standings are going to look. So very big week 1 matchup here. Can't wait to see that, and I think that'll really set the tone for both of these teams' seasons as we move forward. But the New York Jets do make the postseason by my projections. In the very difficult AFC playoff picture, the New York Jets are able to sneak in. And looking at the wild card round, that would have them up against the Cincinnati Bengals, and man, that would be a phenomenal matchup. But as of right now, I would give this one to the Bengals, unfortunately for the Jets, but we really don't know here because the Jets could definitely win the AFC East, and honestly, if the Jets matched up against pretty much any other team here in the wild card round, if they played the Jaguars or even the Bills again, I would like their chances compared to the Cincinnati Bengals. So definitely not set in stone by my estimations that the Jets will lose in the wild card round. I think this is honestly probably a worst case scenario for them right now, assuming their offensive line is able to stay healthy, of course. But before we wrap up, let's take a look at this Jets salary cap situation. And the Jets have a lot of young talent, as we mentioned, so they really aren't in too much of a cap bind right now. And that's why they're able to afford to go out and get a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. And he structures his contract so that the salary cap hit really isn't impacting too much for this season. In fact, Zach Wilson actually has a higher cap hit than Aaron Rodgers this season, believe it or not. Although he's definitely going to get his money at some point. In 2024, it's projected to rise to $17 million, before in 2025 ballooning to $51 million. So definitely going to have to pay Aaron Rodgers at some point, but not today, not this year, because they want one thing, a Lombardi trophy. And because of the way he structured his contract, they're able to go out and sign Dalvin Cook to a 1-year, $7 million deal. Then they still have Breece Hall for 3 more years on a rookie deal. They still have Garrett Wilson for 3 years plus a potential 5th-year option on a rookie deal. They're able to bring in Allen Lazard to a noticeable cap hit here. They give Randall Cobb the 1-year flyer, so really, and Mecole Hardman only $2 million as well, so really not a lot invested in wide receiver. Tight end, not a lot of money invested here either. Offensive line, Dwayne Brown just signed for this season. Laken Tomlinson for the next 2. Mekhi Becton a potential option for next season, but really not a lot of money invested here, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. I think the Jets probably go offensive line in the draft next season, although we will see in a second they might not even have their first-round pick. But now on the defense, Quinnen Williams got the bag, much deserved. John Franklin Myers also with a noticeable cap hit. Linebacker C.J. Mosley for the next 2 seasons at a noticeable cap hit. And then, despite the fact that they might have the best secondary in the NFL, really not a lot of money invested into the secondary. And largely because Sauce Gardner is still signed for another 3 years plus another potential option season that would keep him on a rookie deal through 2027. So definitely a lot of flexibility here for the Jets, and they're absolutely looking to compete right now. And this isn't even like how we talk about with most teams that have a rookie quarterback and they need to win while that rookie quarterback's on that deal still. They have talent at other positions on a rookie deal right now. They have Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall on cheap deals. Then they bring in a veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers and have him structure his deal so that it gives them cap flexibility in the short term as well, so they could double down on the free agent acquisitions to get guys like Dalvin Cook. So at the same time, they still don't have to worry about a rookie quarterback or a young quarterback working out the kinks at the highest level. Aaron Rodgers knows exactly what he's doing right now, and he has one goal in mind, getting his 2nd Super Bowl ring. So definitely fascinated to see how this Jets team looks on the field this year. Then finally, we will also look at just the Jets' future draft pick situation, because there is something to note here. They're probably going to owe a first-round pick to the Green Bay Packers next year, assuming Aaron Rodgers plays 65% of snaps, which, as long as he's healthy, he will. So I imagine we're likely talking about the Packers having the Jets' first-round selection next year, but if that selection ends up being 32nd overall, the Jets will take that all day. So really not too much else to go over with the draft picks here. They will have 2 4th-round picks, but that's really it. There's some stuff going on in the late rounds. That being said, love to hear from any Jets fans out there. I know you guys are a very enthusiastic bunch. Always love talking to you guys. What do you think the Jets' ceiling is this year? How do you think Aaron Rodgers does with the Jets? Can Aaron Rodgers win his 5th MVP to tie Peyton Manning? Will the Jets end up winning the AFC East? Will they win the AFC as a whole? Yeah, this is a team all about the here and now. Very exciting stuff. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And our next video will be on the Philadelphia Eagles. Absolutely looking forward to that video. They are my favorite team, my hometown team, and they're primed for another title run, so can't wait to break that one down. Look forward to talking to you guys then.